All right, welcome to Football Fever here on Chubba TV, and proud to be with you once again. I'm your host Chubba, and I'm proud to announce once again we have my man, the Newcastle fanatic Andy O, and a man that we all know in the NPL Football League world. He's been a part of a magnificent Rockdale coaching staff, also winning a part of that great under-20 championship team last year with Rockdale. My good mate Achilles Markopoulos. Good night, good evening, gentlemen.
Good
Good
evening,
evening, Chubba.
Jobs.
Andy, we're back again, round two of Football Fever.
Mate, I'll tell you what, we it comes around quick, Jobs. Which you used to back in the day at the old studio there at Soccer Stoppage Time. It comes around quick, mate. A lot happens in a week, as you know. It's a week. A week's a long time in football, but good to have Achilles on, and yeah, mate, looking forward to some talk.
Yeah, Football Fever, we started with a bang last week. I mean, we know we brought up the media headlines there with the story of Robbie Stanton. We broke last Monday with Stealth Tony Rallis, who will be on shortly um, as well. And today we've got Bo Bash from the Chief Executive of the Professional Football Australia with a huge story we're going to break today there as well with the PFA. And later on as well in our NPL segment, we'll catch up with Labby Khalidi for you Sydney Olympic fans. Don't go anywhere today because we will be catching up with Labby a little bit later. But last week's story with Robbie Stanton, we broke the news that he will be at the end of the season, he will not be re-signed with Newcastle Jets. He will be terminated. We broke the story first, and it did go a meltdown. It's caught everyone by surprise, but yeah, our story was spot on. And as we know, he at the end of the season, Robbie Stanton will no longer be part of the Newcastle Jets.
Yeah, well, it was huge news, obviously, and yeah, unfortunately, that they went down over the weekend as well, which there was a flickering light for them to make the top six as well. But that's obviously now well and truly gone. I think it was a defeat to Wellington, which we're going to obviously go through results very shortly. Yeah, look, Chubbs, it's one of those things in football that happens, but at the end of the day, our job and your job especially is to sort of break these news, and um, it came as a shock because they have been doing so well, as we discussed last week and in recent times. But yeah, interesting to see where to from here and how the players respond for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, what we'll quickly do, we'll just quickly start off. I'll just quickly go through the A League results, and then once I shoot through them, I'll get you to go through the W League results as well. So it did start off. We had a huge game down at Brisbane where their season. I think they will be hoping that the season finishes quite quickly for Brisbane as they went down to Macarthur 5-1. In the big game in Auckland, they shared the spoils there with Auckland 1, Western Sydney Wanderers 1. Melbourne City 1 beat Central Coast 0. Western United 3 beat Perth Glory 1. And Adelaide United 2 beat Sydney FC 3. And of course, yesterday's game, the Newcastle Jets 1 went down to Wellington Phoenix 2. Just quickly at the ladder, Auckland remains on top on 46 points. Western United in second spot on 41. Melbourne City third on 40. The Wanderers on fourth on 36. Melbourne Victory is fifth on 36. Sydney FC at the moment, they're rounding up that top six, which was a huge big win, as we know, over Adelaide on 33. Just outside the top six is Adelaide 33 and Macarthur 32. So the battle of that top six is really heating up. We'll talk about that in a sec, but let's go into the W League results, Andy.
There was only the one game, a bit of a split round with the Matildas in action, as we know, over the week, Friday night, and again tonight, the Matildas are playing against Korea. So only the one game yesterday saw Western Sydney Wanderers go down 1-0 to Melbourne Victory. Interestingly enough, Chubbs, it was an A-League debut for Annika Stajic, who's obviously the daughter of Wanderers A-League men's coach, Alan Stajic. So that was an interesting one. 19 years of age, she makes a debut in the A-League women's competition. So just on that game, where it leaves the standings with the W League, Melbourne City's on top on 49 points. Melbourne Victory outright second on 47. So they've closed the gap to only 2 points behind Melbourne City. And then you've got a bit of a gap to Adelaide United, Western United, Central Coast in fifth, and Canberra round out the top 6 in the A-League women's competition. So there's still a bit of action to go there. Brisbane Roar, just outside the 6. Brisbane Roar women, who obviously are doing much better than their male counterparts. They're only 2 points behind the 6th spot Canberra women's team. So only the one game over the course of the weekend in the A-League women's competition.
Achilles and Andy, as we look at the A-League, like I said, really heating up. The big game was that Adelaide game against Sydney FC, and Segasic again as a substitute. He's been a big substitution player for Sydney FC again this year, coming up with that 93rd minute goal. That's really going to put a big twist in this top 6 race.
Yeah, absolutely. I was watching that game. It was end to end, and I don't know how Adelaide weren't 2 or 3 goals up in the first half, Chubbs. They were exploiting Sydney FC, and you got to say Sydney FC's goalkeeper was just phenomenal in goals there. Young Devonish Mears, and he pulled off some cracking saves to keep Sydney in the game, and that man. The super sub Adrian Segicic comes on and does what he needs to. He missed a chance 1 minute before he ended up scoring that winner. So end to end, it was a typical 6-pointer, Charles, because if Adelaide win that, they kick clear of Sydney FC in that race for the top 6. But massive result for Sydney FC, especially on the back that on the fact that they've actually still got the Asian Cup. AFC Champions League 2, I should say, not Asian Cup, AFC Champions League 2 game this week. I think it is semi-final. So,
yeah.
For them.
No, it's a big week. Achilles, Auckland's taken the A-League by storm with big crowds, a big game there against Western United, a 1-1 draw. Both teams shared the points. What's your intake of how well Auckland FC have joined the A-League? Big crowds, and it's been a great innovation for the A-League, Auckland FC joining the competition.
Yeah, Chubba, looking at Auckland FC and what Steve Corica has done there is magnificent job. He's built a squad that play entertaining football, a different type of brand. He gets the ball moving real quickly and into the front third, and they just move the ball forward. They get a lot of goals, and looking at the goal scoring chart, they haven't got a goal scorer that's banging in the 10, 12 goals a season. So what they're doing, Auckland, is getting goals from a variety of players, chipping in with 5 and 6 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8s. And that combined, they're coming first for a reason. And I think at the moment, Corica is just waiting for the important games to come to an end and then getting ready for the final series.
100%. I think you're spot on there that Steve Corica has got Auckland purring, and they're going to be, they're going to have a big say when the playoff comes around. One team that I think for me is really finding its form at the right time, and is John Aloisi's team at Western United. I think they're playing some good football. They've moved second on the table and really playing, some great football at the moment. And I think Western United could be if there's a dark horse, well, they're not really a dark horse because they're doing well, but they could be a little bit of smoky tip for me of maybe taking the whole competition out this season.
Yeah, on a roll, Chubbs. I think that was 5 in a row on the weekend, and they're scoring a lot of goals too. 3-1 over the weekend. Their previous game before the international break, they put 6 past Newcastle Jets. The week before that, 4 against Wellington Phoenix. So, yeah, absolutely hitting form at the right time of the season, which is what you want this close to finals. So and definitely, you can't discount how close they will go to taking the whole thing out.
Macarthur FC, I mean, Brisbane are having a season they rather forget. As we even said, Zakovic will be departing Brisbane at the end of the season. That was another scoop we gave here at Football Fever. But Macarthur FC now 32 points, Achilles in 8th spot, 1 point out of that top 6. A big win away to Brisbane, 5-1. Can Macarthur sneak into this top 6? I mean, we'll have a look at Macarthur. They've got next week. Macarthur are playing. Let me have a look here. I did have it here. I think they got the bye, haven't they? Yeah, they're not playing.
Yeah,
they've got the bye next week, but then you've got Sydney FC Auckland, which is a big one as well. and Adelaide's the big one with Perth Glory. But Achilles, what's your thing about Macarthur? Do you think they could? They've left it late, but they're right in the thick of things. Can they squeeze themselves into that top six?
Chaba, with 3 games to go, as you just stated there, and they're playing, some teams that are in the top 5, top 6 there, Sydney FC and Auckland. Their semi-final campaign is going to start early. It's do or die. It's either you win and you give yourself the slightest chance of getting in the 6, or one loss and their season's gone. So they'll be a desperate football team. They'll do whatever it takes to win. Do or die football. Sometimes to play do or die football is probably the best brand to play, because everyone knows what it takes. So, getting 3 points is vital. And those other teams better watch out. So Auckland, Sydney FC that are facing, Macarthur, a team that's got nothing to lose. It's going to be interesting the next 3 or 4 weeks in the A-League.
Andy, Melbourne City, a close win, 1-0 win over Wanderers. They've put themselves they're in third spot on 40 points. How you see Melbourne City, like Achilles said, 3 games to go, travelling with the top 6 around the corner. How are you looking at Melbourne City?
Always a team you've got to be wary of, Chubb. You just got to look at their lineup and look at the talent that they've got. And we know, all these teams that are involved with the City group, and Melbourne City have been a force in the A-League for a number of years. They're always there or thereabouts. Another one who on the day can pretty much match it with any of the top 6 currently standings. So, look, I think that even going back to that Auckland Wanderers result over the weekend, that's a massive result for Wanderers over there, because we know how well Auckland are going. They're absolutely flying. But, it just shows even when you go 1-0 down in these games, or even 2-0, it doesn't mean anything in this league. And a lot of the teams have got the attacking players. Although they may be conceding goals, they can score 4, 5, 6, as we've seen in recent weeks. So interesting that game was only 1-0. That Melbourne City Central Coast Mariners game. Obviously, they always dominate possession and could have had much more goals at the end of the day, but they got the job done. And another team where you're just going to have to keep on tracking how they do leading up to the finals, and it's just going to make for an entertaining final series.
Well, the top 6 playoff, if you look at it, we're only 3 games to go. And I think if you're an A-League officials, they'll be quite happy with the teams that are sitting in the top 6. We know Auckland, they're just bringing in massive crowds. We know Melbourne Victory, well, they've got the biggest membership in the A-League, and we know what crowds they can bring. You've got the Wanderers when they're going well, and in the semi-final series, they can bring a lot of people. And if Sydney FC can stay in there, or an Adelaide United sneak in there, it not only brings a series where top 6, it brings some of the big clubs with the bigger crowds. So you could have a very exciting top 6 series with, big crowds, and that's only going to be breathtaking, a good way to finish the A-League season, which they really need, but they could get some huge bums on seats as well.
Yeah, the only one, obviously, which has always struggled with crowds since they've come into the competition, as we know, is Western United. Let's hope that they can even get some bums on seats, Charles, because it looks like they'll have at this stage they'll have a home semi-final. And they're really, but other than that, all the rest of it, as you mentioned, big clubs, big support. We know the fans always come out come finals time. In all codes, to be honest. In all leagues. So we saw it. We saw it at the NPL. We see it at NPL level week year in, year out as well when it comes to semi-finals. I mean, Achilles, you've been a part of it. So the semi-final games tend to bring out all the big guns in terms of crowds and performances and results.
We'll just take a moment there to welcome Australia's football leading player agent, or no other than Stealth Tony Rallis. We know very close to the show. Good evening, Tony.
Good evening, chaps. Andy, Chubba.
Mate, your audio sounds beautiful.
My audio's beautiful today, Andy. Maybe it was sabotaged by Morris Bisetto from the Newcastle Jets.
Well, we did speak about that football fever. We, Tony, we did say we broke that story last week here on the show about Robbie Stanton being let go at the end of the season. As we know, that story did break midweek, and Robbie Stanton has departed. Since then, they've also signed. Newcastle Jets announced a new CEO, Tanya Drinkwater, who was part of course, the CEO of the netball and also been part of the NRL. She's joined the Newcastle Jets, but once again, we try to get some people, Morris Pesetto, to speak on behalf of the Newcastle Jets. Unfortunately, denied coming on again.
Oh, that's unsurprising, and people of his standing usually go into the fetal position in stealth. Their conduct is always in stealth. Maybe he's trying to convince the new CEO to appoint a coach that's going to let his VPL playing son to be signed. I'm not sure. Good luck to the new CEO, Mrs. Drinkwater, did you say?
Yeah, Tanya Drinkwater, yes.
Yeah, how appropriate. Morris loves the old wine drink on Stain.
Tane, I just mentioned to the boys, just quickly because you've just come on before we look at some other breaking news in the A-League, the top six looking really exciting with some big clubs in there with big support paces, Auckland, Western Wanderers, Melbourne Victory, Sydney FC, Adelaide just out of the top six. But it could be a top six as well where the big clubs, all the big clubs are in with big support. It's going to be a breathtaking final series.
Well, look, it's exciting. I hope the Wanderers fans somehow find their way back to the club. I think Stajic, many aren't a fan of his, and he's had his fair share of criticism. But geez, you got to give him credit. They're playing some good football. They're in the fight, and they're playing quite well. And I hope that they continue to do well. So you hope that fan base comes well. Obviously, Melbourne Victory's got a tremendous fan base. Auckland's demonstrated that they're the leaders in the fan base for all the people that doubted their potential to attract a crowd. But then, there's some others that need to pick up their shoes. Melbourne City, I still can't understand why they can't get in a fan base, and you sort of understand that Western United, they've only just moved into their little boutique training ground, and they're trying to do that. But yeah, Chubb, for sure, if Sydney gets in as well, we've got some serious crowds that could come and long may that continue.
Tane, before we talk about what our segment's going to be on today's first half of the show, we've got Bo Bash, the Chief Executive of the Professional Football Australia, coming on about 7:30. We're going to speak to him about this hard salary cap to the soft salary cap that we'll explain to our viewers and everyone what's that all about. Any other news that you've got breaking in the A-League at the moment?
Rumour today, Chubb, that Carl Vitt may be a candidate for the Brisbane Roar vacant position after Zatkovich will be sacked, and along with Robbie Stanton. And I'm also hearing that the Adelaide United hierarchy may be looking at Ross Aloisi, a former Adelaide United player and a very capable coach that's an assistant with Kevin Muscat in the Chinese Super League. I think both those appointments, whether it's Stanton or Vitt to Brisbane or whether it's Aloisi to Adelaide, will be good. I'm just a bit stumped with the Adelaide, if it was to materialise and if Carl was to be removed, I'm astonished. Here is a man that bleeds Adelaide United, played for the club, played for the state, knows every kid. One of the reasons Adelaide's banked about $4 or $5 million in the last few years is because Carl Vitt believed in these kids. Is Carl Vitt the best and most technical coach? Probably not. But Carl Vitt understands that culture, understands that club, and all those finances, whether it was Irukunda, whether it was Izzo, whether it was the other young boy that they've sold to Brighton, whether it was Mork before that and Goodwin, that's all Carl Vitt and Nathan Kosmina and Marius, the team manager. So I hope it's not true, but the drums are beating. And if they are going to let Carl go, which I hope they're not, then Ross Aloisi represents that town as much as anyone else.
There was a lot of talk as well. I'll go, Andy, you go first.
Sorry, Chubbs. I was just going to say, for Adelaide, if they were to miss the finals, I don't know how they would have missed the finals considering the start of the season they had. Is that probably a factor that they're looking at or waiting for?
Well, let me, and we'll touch on it a bit later, Andy, but the scale of expenditure in what we call a salary cap league is a bit of a fabrication. So the least spending club, Newcastle Jets, spent 2.9 million on players total. And then we look at Adelaide and clubs like Adelaide that are around at 3.4, 3.5 million. It takes time to develop the next batch of players. If you look at the last 3 years, you can't lose Izzo, Craig Goodwin, Irakunda, so many other players that have been sold and generated revenues, even guys that have left and come back like Stephen Hawking, Isaias, they were sold. There was revenue generating thing. Now, to replicate and to bring kids through takes time. Wellington's going through the same situation. Wellington are not. Chief isn't a bad coach all of a sudden. Or Wellington policy is not bad. 7 players left the building. People forget that Paulson and Finn Sermon and Ben Old generated about $4 million in transfers, but they were in the system for 5 years. So the next batch of kids, whether it's Matthew Sheridan, whether it's Isaac Hughes, whether it's young Luke Brooks Smith, they're just going to take some time. And the same with Adelaide. Under-resourced, a couple of injuries, a couple of suspensions, a couple of players maybe getting a little bit older, and that's going to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of clubs are on the move. I was going to ask you, Stealth, because during the week as well, there was a lot of talk as well that Central Coast could be looking at a new head coach as well for next season as well.
I think that would be more Jackson's decision if that was to happen, as opposed to the Central Coast letting him go. Here's another one. I mean, he took over a club that had just lost 7 players. In the following year, where he won the treble, he lost 7 players. You just can't replace it like that overnight. You can't develop players overnight. That's going to be the next big challenge. People forget that in 2021, we only had $2 million in transfers. In 2023, we had 21 million. And I suspect that 2024 is not far off that. When you're selling young players 30, 40, 50 games in, to get the other guys up to speed, to create consistency for the Central Coast Mariners or for the Adelaides, or anyone else for that matter, requires time.
Still, just moving forward, like I said, Bo Bash is going to come on, Chief Executive of the PFA. The big story we know and we wanted to talk about, the APL is looking at going into a hard salary cap. As we know, the A-League at the moment runs off a soft salary cap, which is around the 2.6 million mark, and they can go over that with obviously they do get they do have to pay a fee or whatever if they do go over the salary cap, and that allows some big marquees and so.
And I think you need to explain it properly, Joe. At the moment, we've got a soft salary cap, which is capped at 2.6 million.
Yeah.
And then there's all these other third-party agreements,
correct,
whether it's designated players, marquee players, and scholarships of young players, and then they've got all these other benefits like long service leave players, etc., where they get discount. So that's why we have the disparity where every club is above the 2.6 million salary cap because some can afford to do certain things one way or the other. Well, what I will say is that the APL, in line with the FIFA fair play compensation, is trying to implement a responsibility towards preserving and protecting clubs from self-destructing. At the moment, my understanding is the last A-League season, the collective losses across the 12 clubs at the time was close to $50 million. That's unsustainable. So we have to find a happy medium. Now, that happy medium has 2 pathways, 2 roads. They can go down the track of cost cutting and conserving and playing youngsters and reducing the cap, or they go big and bold, and that requires investment. Currently, as it stands, of the 13 A-League clubs that are participating in the APL, we have 6 billionaire owners. 6. Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne City, Western Sydney Wanderers, Auckland and Wellington. Of course, they're not being pushed by the other 7 that are on Struggle Street. We have to respect the owners. We don't have to like them, but we have to respect that they underpin our league, and it's only because of their goodwill and financial support that we have enabled it. So we have to find a balance, and that's where I think it's going to get delicate between the APL and the PFA, and hopefully logic will prevail.
And what happens if one of these billionaire owners decides to pull the pin, Tone? Because sometimes, as we've seen in other codes or other leagues across the world, if sometimes it's, I don't want to say toy or mean that loosely as in a toy for them or just a bit of fun, but they may end up getting a bit fed up with losing money hand over fist. And
Well, if you look at the six, one thing they have done. I'm not sure about Brisbane. I can't speak for Brisbane, but I can speak for Adelaide. I can speak for Wellington. I can speak for Auckland. I can speak for Melbourne City and Western Sydney Wanderers. Outside their continued losses in underpinning their football teams, every single one of them spent about $200 million collectively in infrastructure.
Mm.
And the myth that the A-League is terrible and shit and this and that and all those myths from daddy daycare centres and theorists, romantic theorists of European football. The reality is this. Even today, in this market, Australian A-League players are in the top 25, 26% paid players in the world. And people might not believe that, but that's the reality. You go to European countries and you go to some of those Asian countries, and while there's exceptions to the rules and there's some wealthy guys underpinning clubs in every league, the poorer clubs are on struggle street. They don't have proper physios, they don't have proper doctors, they don't have proper training facilities. In the A-League, I can say, by and large, not all, but by and large, we provide a good platform for our players. And players in the A-League don't realise that they are in the top 25% paid. Now, I accept that, the top 15% are on another scale, and 10% on the top of that are another scale, and obviously the top 5% are another scale. But what the players and the coaches and the supporters need to realise is, if we lose these benefactors, we don't have a game. They're the facts.
Mm.
Yeah.
Just back on that soft salary cap. Are those third party deals or whatever you want to call them?
Well, they're not third party. They're not third party. You're reverting to another sport. What they are, they're within the rules. That you can spend $2.6 million on your total playing squad, and you've got 6 or 7 exemptions. They being, you can sign 2 designated players and pay them up to $500,000 each. You can sign 2 marquee players, pay them whatever you want. You get a discount for any player that's been at your club for 5, 6, 10 years. You get a discount, homegrown discount. You get scholarships. So people want to invest. The top 2 clubs in that game, and I don't want to mention it because I don't think it's fair, they spent 6.1 to 6 million. Then there's a batch of clubs that spend between 5.2 and 5.6. There's one club that spends 4.4. There's a batch in the 3.5, and then there's Newcastle.
Well, what I'm putting at you then, let's say we've got a billionaire owner, right? They want to, whether a player goes on the market or they want to attract someone or they want to retain one of their star players. Can they then? Is there something that gets scrutinised where they can offer this player a third party?
You know what I would do? I would make it an event.
Hmm.
So I would come in and protect the clubs and say, cap $3.5 million. Mm-hmm. So you say it even to the port, you've got to spend $3.5 million minimum. But if a club, and every club should be entitled to 1 designated player outside that cap. Mm-hmm. But if a club doesn't use a designated player, why don't we create an event selling that off? So if a Bill Foley at Auckland wants to spend more money, he can buy it off in Newcastle. That creates an economy within an economy. So the billionaire guy can go and buy an extra seat for an extra foreign designated player. We've got to create events like that in our game, away from the ground. Okay? But, I mean, I'll get Chubba to post an interesting 22-minute video that was sent to me outlining how the MLS tried and failed, and eventually got it right because 5 brave blokes came in and said, you know what, we're going to go big and bold. We're going to set the standards. And Australia can do the same. I think we need to be more visionary. I think we need to start recruiting players from communities that have a passion for the game. Indonesia, Vietnam, I've been saying it for a long time. Not only for a passion over there, but a passion here. They've got their own communities here, so they'll support. It could be government interventions as a consequence of creating pathways for these Vietnamese and Indonesians, even Indian players. Strong local community support here. I think we can become even more professional by aligning ourselves with various universities and getting infrastructure and creating marketing strategies from our smartest and brightest by giving an allocation of our club to these organisations so we can access their facilities and their infrastructure and some of their brightest. I think they're all low-hanging fruits, but everyone's too busy trying to feed the family. But sometimes you've got to take a leap of faith. And if you look at the MLS, one of their biggest strategies was they realised that there was 25 million Mexican immigrants and 25 or 70 million across the border. So what did they do? They started recruiting Mexicans. Yeah, but they started recruiting Mexican players. And all of a sudden, this TV subscription went through the wall. Imagine if we got a couple of Indonesians. What do you reckon will happen to Paramount subscription, both locally and abroad? Okay. For example.
I'll go through the roof. Just to interrupt you there, it's our pleasure to have on the Football Fever tonight Beau Bash, the Chief Executive of the Professional Football Australia and the President of FIFA Pro. He's also a former defender who played in Australia and Scotland. Good evening, Beau.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for having me on. Much appreciated.
Good evening, Beau.
Yeah, the reason
before we start, I just want to ask, am I out of the naughty chair yet? Because you're a bit upset.
You're allowed in. Only you're on probation, mate. So probably.
I thought I'd give you a cheer, Beau, because I love you, mate.
Beau, we wanted to get you on the show today. As we know, right now the A-League operates under a soft salary cap. That means each club has 2.6 million cap, but they're allowed to spend beyond their signing 2 marquee players, adding scholarship players and using various allowances and so on. There's been a lot of talk about now the APL is proposing a hard salary cap locked in around 3.5 million with no exceptions and so on. What are you hearing about this, and what are your thoughts about moving to a hard salary cap over the soft salary cap we're running at the moment?
Look, that proposal certainly hasn't been tabled with us, so that may be the position of the APL, but we certainly haven't got that far in negotiations. There's been preliminary discussions around how we get to an agreement. There's sort of 16 months to go on the current deal. What I'd like to think is we are able to zoom out and take a bit more of a macro view around where are the league's finances at, what's the strategy for the league, and how do we build a labour market that not only gets us through this sort of challenging time, because I think we all know the economic discussion is going to be a challenging one for this next negotiations, but how we build a model that can, in 2-3 years' time, see significant growth, significant security for club owners who've invested significantly into the competition, and give them more confidence going forward, and increase the ability of our league to attract and retain talent. So as far as sort of hard salary caps, luxury taxes, removal of salary caps, all those sort of things, we certainly haven't got to any of those discussions. And I'd like to think that the starting point will be actually around what does the league need to achieve, and how do we sort of get a detailed understanding of the financial health of the competition as well before we move into that.
Because you would think it would also probably would it affect the central bargaining agreement as well if something like that came in as well? That would have to be looked at as well.
Yeah, look, in terms of for next year, none of that sort of change can't come in for next season without our agreement. And certainly to the APL have said to us that we want to make sure we've got enough runway to have a really comprehensive discussion around the league. So I think we've all agreed we'd love the league to be in a stronger financial health, and for players to have great careers, they need to be operating in a great industry. And there's a bit of work to do to be able to get the competition into a position where it can offer great careers for players, but also importantly give the owners certainty to continue to invest into clubs and into the league more broadly.
Tony, what would that mean, you're close to it, what would that mean for contract squad sizes, future earning capacity across the league if a hard cap was introduced?
Look, I believe that we've got to find a happy medium and a happy balance, and I think all stakeholders need to be on the table, sit around the table, PFA included, players and clubs. We can't go from one extreme and another. We can't sit there and disregard the owners' pain. Like I said, they probably lost about 50 million last year, and that's not including the APL. That's unsustainable. I think with respect to any proposed hard cap, I think it just can't be hard. It's got to have some flexibilities and maybe some, I suggested earlier, maybe, it's, for example, 3.5 million, but there's one or two different trading mechanisms that some clubs then can exceed that. I also believe there's got to be a central APL where we reclassify marquee. In other words, the game or the APL can issue marquees if they think it's a Del Piero or Dwight York level. We've taken the mickey out of the word marquee and we've misused it, created onus on players that really should never be called marquees. So there's some flexibility. I am acutely aware that the owners today are struggling. And I'm acutely aware that despite their financial struggles, that a lot of them are investing. We saw only last month, Macarthur announced that they're going to build a home of excellence. We know Sydney FC they've gone in Macquarie. We know Ledra and Melbourne City have got their own facilities. So people are investing. I think the biggest challenge that we all have, and the responsibility of the PFA and stakeholders like agents and all that, we have a responsibility to work with the clubs. And we also have a responsibility as a collective to pick the low-hanging fruit. Bo and I have often discussed the possibilities of doing a roadshow and talking about the benefits of the A-League. And some of those benefits are not being maximised. People talk about player development. We're starting to see it now. So that's one benefit. Our connection to Asia should be a benefit for overseas investors. They shouldn't just look at the TV revenue and say, well, your TV money's no good, so I'm not going to invest. They should look at the opportunity of exposing their clubs into Asian markets. They should assist with some of their infrastructures where we go and develop and identify and take our neighbours' talented players, like I said in the past, Indonesia, Vietnam, because we've got communities here that will support these players, because just like the old traditional Greek, Italian, Croatian, Hungarian clubs were developed out of the back of their communities. We've got all these communities that aren't rugby league people, they aren't AFL people, but we're not engaging with them, we're not communicating with them. And that's not hard to do. It just requires a collective planning system and an approach system. I mean, I wish the APL and Football Australia focused on those communities as much as they focus on those yellow lines and all those other supportive things that they want to talk about, while alienating the traditional rusted-on football fan.
I think a couple of points with that too, Tone, as well too, that's relevant is in Australian football, we will spend a lot of time focused in on what isn't working or what we don't have, and we rarely sort of go back and look at what has worked. So if you look at the success of the 2015 Asian Cup, that was largely built around deep connection into community, understanding community leaders within there, connecting the sport into those communities and the diaspora as well. And that was done incredibly successfully, and the competition was all the better as a result of that. So we've just spent a heap of time speaking to A-League fans through fan focus groups, a really comprehensive survey as well too, so we could understand how we build those deep connections with fans. And what we heard, particularly in relation to the A-League men's, was atmosphere is vital. People come because it's a great atmosphere and it offers something very different to the other sports. So that's something that we know we need to safeguard and prioritise. We also know that community is really important. So to Tony's point that he just made of connecting in and being a net contributor in those communities and making sure that football is showing up day in, day out to help make the lives of people in those communities better. And then when we sort of look at sort of ownership and all those sort of parts, sort of building off, how do we build a model that allows clubs to have the certainty to go and deeply invest in their communities as well too? And the league has come a long way. Certainly when I played, there weren't training facilities like there is at Western Sydney nor at Melbourne City and others. So we made a heap of progress. Our challenge is now, how do we continue to build off the back of that? And what's sort of emerged over the last couple of years that I'm really excited about, which we weren't discussing in the last collective bargaining agreement, were transfer fees. That was, Tony can attest to that. It was minimal international transfer fees, as little as sort of 3 years ago. The Asian Cup prize money, Asian Champions League and Asian Champions League Elite. So these revenues associated with success in Asia are far higher than what they were as well. And also building off the back of club benefits, World Cup benefits as well too. So there are more and more incentives now that are available. The task is for us now in a sort of new world, how do we build an economic model that creates 13 strong A-League men's clubs, 12 strong A-League women's clubs with these opportunities that weren't there before as well too. So that's something that I think is really exciting about the future.
Well, we can't build on it. when we're too busy taking pot shots at each other and talking anything negative about our game that we can. You and I have often discussed with you that, you know, there is a shining example called the MLS that had the same 3 or 4 challenges that we as a game face. Geographically, large footprint, dominated by 4 sports that were underpinned by major media organisations who used to put it down. And if I hear one more time someone say, oh, but that's America. Well, it was always America, but they got it wrong 300 times. They only got it right in the last 30 years. It was about investment, and it was about getting the right people to invest. And while we have some people that have capacity and they have invested, investment for me means infrastructure, investment in communities, and low-hanging fruit like that. We are not a collective, and it'd be fair to say that that's our biggest challenge, that we're not a united front.
Yeah, I think one of the key missing ingredients, mate, is clarity around a vision, for example, and a plan that we can all sort of buy in that gives us clarity around the direction we're heading into. And I think some of the real success stories to simplify the MLS success is, you know, great ownership that can really invest, great infrastructure where they've actually built their stadiums that creates a great atmosphere for fans, and in markets where there's massive atmosphere for football. And I think we've got our own example for that in Auckland, right, of where we've done expansion really well. An ownership group that can invest significantly into the sport. They're playing in a great stadium in a market that was clearly ripe for football and really passionate about it. You get those 3 things right, and we've done really well. I think it's self-evident where we've maybe fallen down on one of those 3, or we haven't been able to be in the right market. The ownership group's been really unstable. The stadium, say in the case of Brisbane, has been unsuitable and far too big. It's made it really difficult for our sport to succeed. So I think you're right, Tony. The MLS shows us what the fundamentals are if we get it right. And if we do the fundamentals really well, the league should work. It should be successful in this country.
My argument to this is you're a major stakeholder, major player. You represent the brand, that being players. Is this type of dialogue happening constantly, or are we still all a divided family that's all going in different directions?
Yeah, I think one of the things as we reflect over the last few years is the CBA is specific around minimum wages, the salary cap, you know, number of days off a player has, some really important stuff around medical standards and insurance. Where it has its limitations is this big level discussion that we're talking about now, Tony. The big things that we need to get right to ensure that the game can actually fund a decent minimum wage, fund a decent salary cap and the like. So I don't think culturally this has been accepted in the game, that our views as players and the PFA is welcome around this. We'd like to think that there's an opportunity to change that now, because big decisions have often been made without us, and we think our insights could have benefited the decision-making process, and also because those decisions have a massive impact on us. So I'd like to think there's an opportunity to change that, Tony. And certainly there hasn't been enough discussion to my mind, around strategy, around planning, around revenue, around how to rebuild the sport, around some key priorities going into the future.
Well, my question to you is, how can there be when we've got the PFA and the APL, let's call them the mum and dad, messy divorce? We've got the delinquent state federations. Every child runs its own show. And then we've got the PFA agents. We've got some of the challenges that the game faces if we were a collective, are easily fixed. And what you got to do is look at the leadership. Volantis is a classic example of leadership. Rugby league during COVID, with all its saturated media coverage and all this saturated amounts of money, was nearly broke. The AFL had to mortgage its stadium. So our game survived all that, and our game, continued to survive on the back of these good people. But unfortunately, I think we're so divided, and that's the key. The person that can come in and bring, like Volantis has brought everyone in and created this unbelievable facility of revenue creating and revenue saving and revenue. We need a leader like that that's going to unite us. I just don't see who that is and how we're going to unite the different factions.
Yeah, I think it's often spoken about, I'm sure everyone on the call can speak to instances around disunity, whether it's between member federations, local zones, local clubs, those sort of parts. I think that is a significant challenge and has been pointed out for a long period of time. But I don't think we're the only sporting or football country in the world that's challenged by that. I think the key part is in an environment like that, you need to have, to your point, Tony, absolute clarity around what matters and really pursue that. And I think momentum around those sort of things allows the game to be able to unite around some key parts. I think if you said to most people what matters, they would say the national team matters. Success at international tournaments deeply matters to Australian football, a thriving domestic league. So I think you get agreement around that. But then you look at how the sport operates, what are the incentives to reinforce that idea? So when we qualify for a World Cup, who benefits and where does the money go? How does that impact the sport? When somebody goes deep into the Asian Champions League, when a player is sold overseas, how do we create a model that means that not only are we sort of philosophically aligned with each other, but actually it's self-reinforcing all the time. So I think there's a big opportunity around that. The governance model is a challenge, but I think if you start doing those things, some of those tensions around the governance model should lessen at least, mate.
Can I
Do you
just
think-
sorry, Tom.
you go in.
Yeah, just back on the revenue and in terms of the league and how the league, owners are tipping in the money and losing money in the league. I think one thing I always get asked is, where is all this money going for? I've recently had family friends about just enroll or register their young 8-year-old in the local park soccer team, and they were absolutely gobsmacked at the amount of rego fees that they had to pay, and sort of explained the process and how it's always been like that. And I'm the same boat with my sister. My daughter plays at NPL 1 level, and I'm pretty sure I don't need to tell you guys what sort of rego fees you're paying at that level. But that whole revenue stream and where that money is going to, because the clubs cry poor and say, well, let's go on up line to Football Australia. We don't see any advertising around the A League.
But you're confusing it, Andy. I've got to stop you there, mate.
Yeah.
You're confusing some daddy daycare centre organisations in the various state leagues. That's not filtering through to the A League clubs, and that's a totally different. So they're not there to filter their money into A League clubs. My dearly beloved Sydney Olympic has become a daddy daycare centre for a few personal vested interests, including the head coach. I mean, charging $3,300. I mean, there'd be people at Rookwood and Botany Cemetery that had that club there, and at its great days, they'd be turning in their graves watching at the corruption that's going on at a club like that. But you're misunderstanding. The APL's got nothing to do with that.
I understand that, Tom. I'm talking more about the disconnection between the whole game and why it's not successful.
Well, I mean, we've got a panellist on our show that was one of the rebel 4 groups that didn't want to join the Football New South Wales because they wanted to have a united front. Nick Cambunius. I mean, I'd love to get him on the show and ask him why he, with one of 4 associations, tortured Football New South Wales when they were trying to unite with Football Australia. Self-interest, egos, daddy daycare centres.
I think too, Andy, if you come back to what you said there around, it's really important to tackle the issue around cost of play. So for a lot of people, they can probably afford it, but then there'd be equally a lot of people that can no longer afford to send their kids into these high performance programs. And that's a massive issue for the sport, even if we're missing out on one kid. I always think of Mile Jedinak dragged us to a World Cup in 2018. Imagine if Mile had been priced out of the sport, the fortunes of the sport would be vastly different. So we need to come up with a model that can actually support people that can't pay to play the sport. Equally, I think what's really important in relation to that is you've got people that can actually afford to pay more. So the emergence of all these private academies and others is existing outside the sport as well too. So you've sort of got 2 things going on at once, people that can spend more and then people that can't afford to get into the sport as well too. And that doesn't really speak to a functional economy that we've got right now. And then to Tony's point, when you look at the A-League, well, if we have a thriving A-League, the hope would be that we can then invest into free academies, provide great support for young kids, have the equivalent of Auskick that they have in the AFL and others, and really grow that space. Because I agree, there'd be a lot of people in the community right now that if they've got, say, 3 kids and it's $3,000 per year at a minimum for those kids to participate in a high performance environment, the sport's potentially missing out on talent. So we need to be able to address that. But to Tony's point, that's certainly not funneling into the A-Leagues. And I've heard the argument before that it's sort of funding the national teams. The national team players are in a revenue share, so they just share in a percentage of what they actually generate, rather than sort of other revenues that they're not associated with.
Excuse me, gents, can I cut in for a sec?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay. My point is one about broadcasting. What broadcasting deal have we got around the A-League and the Socceroos and the Matildas that filters down through to the A-League clubs? Like, wouldn't that help the revenue? Like,
Yeah, so in terms of the revenue, how does it flow down?
Yes.
yeah, like,
Yep.
which broadcaster at the moment is paying for the A-League to be shown?
Yeah,
What channel?
It's Paramount. So Paramount funds that at the moment. They have a deal with the A-Leagues, and then that money flows into the APL for those broadcast rights. I think there's another year to go on that deal,
That
so
finishes
next year as well.
2026, yep.
And then that money's split equally amongst the A-League clubs. But that's how it operates currently.
I just wanted
And do we
to.
know what that amount is across 13 clubs?
The
Well,
amount is insignificant compared to rugby league and all that. They'd be lucky
Correct.
if we're getting $500,000. The reality is this: we don't have enough competition, so we can't ask for more money. We're lucky that we've even got a broadcast deal. The broadcast deal and the myth that people want to talk about, it exists in rugby league and exists in AFL because they generate a lot of commercial outcomes. We don't in our game, and unfortunately, we can't depend on broadcast deal until we work it and grow our game to what it used to be like in the mid 2010s, 12s, 14s. So there is no significant broadcast deal.
My point is this: if we try to get 13 clubs all on the same playing field and all successful, it'll take a very, very long time because it doesn't happen nowhere across the world. That happens nowhere. Nowhere have you got 13.
No one's suggesting that. No one's suggesting that. Everyone's trying to. You're missing the point. It's not about individual clubs. It's about the APL, and it's about uniting the front so we have one voice. So when we go to government, we can talk to government as one voice. At the moment, Football Australia's going to government, APL's going to government, federations are going. We're not one voice. That's what Volantis has achieved with the National Rugby League.
Correct. Just
I agree with you. You need to be.
Just a quick point. A lot of people talk about those fees. I know we don't want to get on those fees, but we talk about $3,000. But people forget it's over 30 games. You're getting kids to play, especially in the youth league youth league program. They're playing over 30 games. If you look at the cost, it's probably about $100 a week. But they're getting 3 nights a week training. They're also getting a professional licensed coach. So they're getting the proper, everything above board. So if you break it down to figures on a week, like on a weekly figure, it makes more sense. I know when you hear a 3,000 figure pop up at first, but people forget it's over 30 weeks. We're not talking about it's over a 30-week season with 3 nights a week training plus a game on the weekend. So it is. I do agree the fees can come down, but if you look at it individually, it's not too bad.
The problem is the fees are not going back into the kids' jobber. They're going to fund over 35-year-olds for a nothing competition. And with all due respect,
not always, Tony. I'm in a club too. Not always.
Yeah, but with all due respect, some of those historical great clubs, they're there just to fund the senior team. And I've seen at the club that you've interviewed a coach tonight, where the coach is sending letters out, give me 10,000, give me 20,000. The selection processes are tainted and contaminated to the detriment of real talent.
I think the point you sort of made there as well too, there's sort of almost value for money question you can run through. My kids, I've got 2 kids. Some of them, learn an instrument, do dance, do whatever, do swimming lessons. It's all pretty expensive. Correct. To be fair. There's a lot of cost associated with that. My oldest plays football, and she's just in an under 12 community program, and that's reasonably sort of cost effective. But I think what matters most is, regardless of sort of being able to stack other sports against each other, if we're saying that many within the community can't afford it, if it was $1 and they're unable to afford it, well, then it's $1 too much. And I think that's the challenge we've got. Who are we missing out on? You know, a lot of the successful, if you look at our junior national teams, we've got a heap of asylum seekers, migrants, and others coming into the sport. So we know that accessibility is really important. They're often coming from really difficult socio-economic backgrounds. So as a game, we need to sort of come up with a solution. And that doesn't necessarily maybe mean that it's free for everyone, but that means there's a system that can flex for those that can't afford it to be able to get into the sport. And for others, you know, that can afford it, you know, I'm fortunate, I'm in a position that I can afford to pay for my kids' fees. You know, I think it's fair enough that I do pay around that. But for those who can't afford it, we need to come up with something to get them in. Because, as I said, imagine we're at a point in the future where we just miss out on a World Cup or what have you. And the basis of it was that kids couldn't afford to play football. That would be pretty devastating.
100%. Bo, thank you for your time tonight. It's been excellent. I know you're travelling as well, going to club from club, and you gave us your time tonight. Really appreciate it, and we're loving the work you're doing with the PFA. You're doing a great job, and just keep it going. And hopefully, like you said, the futures only can look bright. Hopefully,
I hope so. And Tony, we'll get you off the naughty step, mate. Now, I promise.
I love you, Bo.
I know, mate.
Thanks,
I appreciate it. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Take care. See you guys.
See ya. Well, Bo's doing a great job, as we know, Stealth, and he's in one of the hardest jobs he can be at the moment. And like he said, to try and unite governments, PFA, APL, it's just a big task. It's an enormous task.
Bo and his crew are doing a great job. In fact, they're probably one of the most efficient, in my opinion, organisations. There'll be clubs now that will want to stab me for making that statement. I've had a lot to do. I see the crisis meetings and how they deal with Australian players that get caught out overseas, and how they rally. No time is a burden for them and the legal team, and a lot of the education programs they put together. I just would like to see the PFA communicate more with the clubs, and that's where they can jointly find solutions, because they're both important stakeholders in the game. But he's a good guy. He's a football guy. He cares about the game. He loves the game, and yeah, he's doing his best.
Can you elaborate why you were in the naughty chair, mate? Or
is he ever out of the naughty chair? Is he ever out of the naughty chair?
We know that.
I mean, I'm in the naughty chair with some of your cousins, right? I'm in trouble with them.
Stealth.
We've got here, but we can all agree on. We've got some really passionate people that really love football, and we all want to see it progress in the future, in the near future. You know, we want the A League to be doing well. We want the W League to be doing well, and hopefully, you know, everyone can unite and be on the same front.
I think
you can't unite until you change the constitutions, and the constitutions are very tight. Frank Lowy, trying to get the votes at the time, gave the state federations more power. We're a divided race. I think it's almost like one particular part of the business has to grow to force the others to follow.
And I think you hit the nail on the head before. I think a majority of it, unfortunately, comes down to egos. I mean, I see it at club level, and the politics that goes on, the egos involved, it's just ridiculous. And can you imagine that? Obviously, that's all happening up line as well. It's a sad reality of where football is in this country, unfortunately.
It's also incompetence in some parts. Like, there might be egos, and I don't have a problem with someone having an ego if they've got ability. But I'll give you an example, and I won't mention. The transfer market is one of the most viable tools that the clubs have to generate and make up some of the $1.5 million they lost each from the TV rights. So when you bring international guests, and I brought 2 from the MLS, and they've left a few $1 million on each occasion. And you say to clubs, I've got this international guest, and they don't know how to cater for it, with the exception of a few. A few have done it properly. Great Newcastle took an international guest that was looking at players. With the exception of the sports director, no one came to greet him. No one came to introduce. No one came to sell their story. So some of their faults and losses comes from within the building of the Abbott and Costello stupid fraternity.
Fortunately, that happens a lot in our game, unfortunately, and yeah, we pay the price for stuff like that. We're still at a very, as I call it, we've got our all plates on when it comes to things like that.
No, it's just people with egos with no ability.
Yeah.
And they run the game. They think they deserve to run the game on the back of a FIFA PlayStation.
Stealth, once again, thank you. Your input's been magnificent as always. Thank you for helping the show the last 2 weeks. We'll get you on in the next few weeks as well. You're a big part of our show and appreciate all your work again tonight.
Thanks, buddy.
There you go, boys. Stealth Rallis and leading football agent here of the country and Probation, the PFA. And like they say, it's a hard job to unite the PFA, APL, the A-League, all the federations. We're a different federation in every state. I mean, it's just an enormous task. But if we do want football in this country, I think one day we need to be under all the same umbrella, all pushing the same tune, going the same way. Until that happens.
The sad part is, back on what Achilles mentioned before, Chubbs, is these TV. I mean, there's one game free to air on a Saturday night. You're talking the biggest game in the world football, the biggest game in the world, right? We're in
It is the most participated sport in this country.
100%.
And to have one Saturday night, 7:30, I think it's an absolute shame. Like, you want to promote the game, have games, televised Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so everyone can watch it and promote the game in its right.
Standard, the quality of the league is great. Even the women's competition, we got to be sure. I mean, I know there is a level of commitment to the women's game as well, but these games have got to be like the Matildas are tonight, Friday night, prime time, Channel 10, fantastic. But the league itself needs to, unfortunately,
Look, the broadcast still finishes at the end of next year. Let's see where it's going to go. But we've got to keep moving forward. I mean, we're running a little bit behind time. We're going to switch our attention now to the NPL, the Premier League and NPL 1. And we're also going to get Labi Halidi, head coach of Sydney Olympic as well. They had a great win over the weekend. What we're going to do, I'll just quickly read out the results and then we'll arrange Labi to come on as well and we'll have a quick chat with him about what's happening at Sydney Olympic as well. So the results were Western Sydney, the results were Rockdale City 1, Spirit 1, we had Sydney United 2, Apia 1, we had Manly 6, Wollongong 0. We had Marconi 3, St George City 1, Blacktown City 1, Sutherland 0, as we said, Sydney Olympic 4, Mount Druitt 0, Western Sydney Wanderers 0, Sydney FC 0. The table at the moment as it stands, Spirit still on top, the surprise package, equal points on 21 points with Marconi Stallions. Marconi looking very good, solid for a back-to-back they're chasing this year. Manly United, another surprise package, in third spot on 15. Rockdale are in fourth on 15 points as well. Fifth, Blacktown City on 15 points. And sixth is RPR, which rounds out the top 6 on 14 points. You've got St George City on 14, Olympic on 12, played a game less, Sydney United on 12, Sutherland 11, Wollongong 10, Sydney FC Youth 8, Mount Druitt 8, St George City 7, Central Coast 5, Western Sydney United Youth. I'll just, while I get Labi Halidi on, we'll look at some of the games. Achilles, the big game was, of course, at the top of the table clash where we had Perkovic's Spirit FC flying against Rockdale Cities. They shared the points 1-1. I believe you were at that game. How did you see that game? And Spirit FC, they've really, they're doing well. They're still undefeated, and they're still ticking along nicely, picking up points consistently.
Tubba, I made my way out to Illingdon Sports Centre on the weekend, on Sunday, yesterday, and it was a pleasure to watch both teams go head-to-head. I was really surprised with the way Perkovic has got his team playing. Fast, free-flowing football. They don't hold on to the ball too long. They move it forward at speed. He's got a couple of very technical players in around the 10 and the 9 that combine really well. A very solid back four. And they're very vocal. Like, every player knows what they're doing, And on the other hand, you've got Rockdale. Rockdale, me being there last year and seeing how hard they train and what Paul D gets them to do week in, week out, and the way they play their shape in their blocks and the way they move the ball. It was like end-to-end football, and it could have gone either way. Rockdale had plenty of possession, created chances, and then Spirit would get it and come at them at 100 miles an hour. So both teams should be commended for playing really attractive football. And that's what you want to see in the NPL. You want to see, fast-flowing football and these, guys trying to get a gig in the A-League, and hopefully, some A-League clubs are watching, like Harrison Devison-Mears, the goalkeeper from Rockdale last year. Now he's, the gloveman for Sydney FC. And it goes to show that, some clubs are watching, and whether, you're coming first or last in the NPL 1, it doesn't matter, So let's hope that all these other clubs can take note and play entertaining football to hopefully bring the crowds back.
Labby Halidi, good evening. First grade coach of Sydney Olympic, one of the historic clubs here in Australian football land, probably one of the most pressured jobs, cooking jobs in the land as well at Sydney Olympic Football Club. Good evening, welcome to Football Fever.
It's been a while. Thank you for having me.
Firstly, before we'll talk quickly about the game against Mount Druitt on the weekend, and then we'll get into a few things about what's been happening at Sydney Olympic and how everything's developed. But you had a good win on the weekend against Mount Druitt. Watched the game. It's good after not playing the week before. Good solid win against Mount Druitt, 4-0.
Yeah, look, I think the first half you could tell that having that weekend off, it sort of wasn't ideal, but in the second half things clicked and we scored quite quality goals, but you got to give respect to the other team, and it was a good battle for about 50-55 minutes, and then sort of the quality started to come out, and we showed what we can do. But again, like I said, with all due respect to Mount Druitt, again, they were good for 50-55 minutes. They were really good, and it was a good battle. And to be fair, that's what you expect now. There's no easy games, and it was a good win, and we just take one game at a time.
Labby, Sydney Olympics always been known as a club that is always challenging. They want to challenge. They want to win the championship. It was happening in the NSL days, even in the NPL days. I know of late it's been a lot harder financially for the club as well. Over the years, they've got the agreement. We're still playing out of Belmore Oval. Yourself, I know you've had you've had your critics as well that you've had over the past 2 seasons. It hasn't been, it is a difficult at times. Like I said, it's a pressure cooker, hot seat club. What are your thoughts about how is the club moving forward? I know we've got the B League coming. What is the club's aim? Like, is it just now more of a feeder club? We're trying to produce players. What direction is Sydney Olympic in right now?
Look, Jabba, I think the club means a lot to me. I think it's a club that's given me my first steps as a youngster, and then obviously I went on to have a playing career. And you fast forward 15, 20 years later, I'm back at the club. I know what the club is. I know what the club was, and I really feel that because I was one of them, and I am one of them now. It gave me everything. So for people that want to know my history, obviously they took me as a 15-year-old and under Frank Arrock and Peter Raskopoulos and so on, names that were there back there at the time. So the club has always been big. The club will always be big. Whether that's we're talking about winning or not or whatever, the club is just, the history of a club is rich, and I know that firsthand because I was part of it back then in 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, and so on, before the A-League started, and then went on into the A-League journey. Yeah, it's been challenging, but it's a challenge that I face, and I'm at the front of it, and I take the criticism and the good and the bad. It's part of it. I think I've had it at Wanderers. I was at Wanderers for 12 years, and there's no different there either when I was as a player. Now, as a coach, obviously we're trying to implement new things, and I think you can see the squad this year. average age, I think it's 22, 23, apart from Ziggy and Parkhouse. It's a very young squad. It's a squad that we look to get from different part of sort of Australia, not just New South Wales. We've got boys from Brisbane, we've got boys from Newcastle, boys from New Zealand, and so on. The squad is quite young, and they're gelling. They're showing signs of improvement. There's a lot happening in the development phase of the youth coming up. A lot of players, the 18s, the 20s, that are training with the first grade. We lost last year, just in the youth space, around 12 players to A-League clubs. And look, we will never stand in anyone's way. Just the last 10 days, we lost Sammy McAholton to America. Another good player, another good servant to the club. So at the same time, the challenge is obviously to try and challenge at the top and win things and be at the top and compete. And make no mistake about it, I'm very, very well aware of that. But at the same time, we've got the championship coming ahead, which they're obviously with the B League, you want to call it. So there's a lot of things happening there in terms of us, the training structure, the training setup. I think we're probably the only New South Wales club at the moment that train in the morning, 4 morning sessions a week. So there's a bit of professionalism going into the setup. And part of that was the players that we recruited that don't have their jobs, that don't have to work from 6, 7 a.m.s, because we started morning training sessions. So it's all these little things that are adding the little 1%ers. And at the same time, again, I keep saying the same thing. We need to be competitive. I'm well aware of it. I am at the front of it. And like I said, I've been through it before as a player, and now it's no different. I'm no different to any other coach either. Like I said, every club in NPL also you got to respect them. And so if you're not winning, then you got to put your hand up. You're going to be the first one. But there's a lot of things going behind the scenes in terms of the youth, the development, and the players coming up. And then you can see that on the performance of level during the weekends games. So yeah.
Achilles.
Maybe can I?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chubbs. I just want to ask Labby about a competition that's become one of my favourites. I know a lot of people I speak to about football at that NPL level is the Australia Cup, and how clubs like Sydney Olympic take the Australia Cup. We've seen some of the scenes in the Australia Cup competition in recent years have been magnificent, and a lot of NPL clubs do very, very well because of the structure of when the A-League clubs are incorporated into that competition. But how important is a good cup run, as so to speak, is what they call it overseas, and now that it's here, how important is a good cup run for the club, Labby, and for yourself personally?
I think it's very important, but it's not about me. It's never been about me. It will never be about me. I think a cup, it's important because it gives you the platform of players obviously showcase themselves and the talent of what they're all about. Now, whether you end up going into around 32, 16 and so on and finding an A-League club, obviously that's what everybody wants. That's just one of the targets. But again, it's another game. And I keep saying to the players, every time that you put the jersey on, it weighs, even if it's a friendly game. So a cup game, of course, it's important, and it's a competition that I, first of all, as a player, respected, but now as a coach, definitely respected even more. But again, it's a more opportunity for players to show themselves. Like I said, you could end up drawing an A-League club where you bring attention to yourself as a player individually, and of course as a club. So I think it's very important.
Achilles?
Labby, how are you, mate? Achilles here. Just a couple of things I've got to mention is, Sydney Olympic being an ethnic background club of Greek culture, and a lot of aspiring young Greek kids, aged anywhere from 11, 12, 13s and onwards, they want to come and play for Olympic and, playing in their youth system and then, go to the 18s and the 20s. But looking at the first grade structure, I can only see that there's one or two, ethnic Greek backgrounds there. Is there anything the club that can do to promote the Greek players and get the Greek fans coming back to the game?
At the time, and it's a good point, but at the time when I came at the club, I can't recall, apart from the goalkeeper and any young players coming through and playing when I came. I was the one that gave minutes to Peter Politis. Unfortunately, a boy that I have a lot of respect, a boy that grew up at the club, a boy that showed a lot, and I thought he was the next best thing coming around in NPL. If I'm being honest, he showed all the qualities that he could be an A-League player. Unfortunately, had a big injury against South Melbourne. Michael Varkas is another one. Varkas is a young kid again, but he's had a bit of a turbulence in the last few weeks with an injury. We've got a lot of 20 players that are in there that are training with first grade, and it's about just waiting for the right opportunity and the timing of it. Like I said, throughout our youth setup, we have, again, different cultures. It's not just about one or the other. And I was a young kid.
My point is this: I've been involved with other clubs, and I know that there is a prerequisite there to get, the sponsors more involved and the fan base more involved. And I did a poll on the weekend 2 weeks ago, and there's 25 ethnic Greek players playing in the NPL 1. 25. And, me being of Greek heritage myself, I look at it and I say to myself, why can't Olympic have 3 or 4 there, or 5? Wouldn't it be good to have a Greek club? Because having the Greek colours, wouldn't it be nice to see 3 or 4 Greek players there and promoting the Greeks again, bringing that base back?
Like I said, at the moment we had them 2, and the 2 that are really showed positive signs, great signs. When I came to the club, there was none of them young ones, and they're getting it. There's a line in the 20s that are coming up, and again, I know what the club is all about. I was a 15-year-old when the club gave me the steps and gave me everything. I understand the club very well. And again, I'm there to give youngsters an opportunity. If you look throughout all the clubs since I've been here, there's all by youngsters. And that time will tell, but also the action on the field will also tell. That will speak louder than my words. So,
Labby, I think not just Olympic, I think a lot of the ex-NSL clubs too, one of the hardest factor is to keep the community engaged. I mean, they were playing in the elite competition. Now they're playing in the NPL. I think the B League or whatever, the round robin competition that's going to be played at the end of the season. But how hard is it, like yourself, and how hard is it for the club to still keep the community engaged? I mean, it must be a hard job at the moment.
Look, you have to understand the club, and I'll give you an example. I think I went to some of the fans that come at the game that I've seen, and I've met them face to face. I went to their houses the other day, and I gave them the membership in their doorsteps myself. And not many people know that. Yeah. And I'm not saying that because it's about me, but like I said, I understand what the club is about, and I went to their doorstep and I delivered the membership passes and made them feel welcome and made them come to the game. And again, they want to win. I want to win. That's normal. That's what we're doing it for. It's that passion, that drive that especially the clubs, the historic clubs have. That's never going to go away. So I think you have to understand the club, and then once you understand the club, then you can engage with the community and with the people. And I do understand the club, and that's what. That just gave you one example of like we go into schools and whatever might be the case. To get out there more and promote the youth, promote the youngsters. There is a chance there. There is a pathway there. And like I said, Peter Politis, before I came, he never played 3 games in a row in the first grade. Michael Varkas is no different. And I played him. So, again, this is just an example, but in every club around the world, there could be a year where it's a bad cycle. It could be a year where it's a development phase, and then obviously the end product. So, and you're going to monitor these kids, and you can't just throw them out there and expect them because they are going to get burned out. So it's the environment. First, you build the environment, and then you give them the pathway. I was 17-year-old where Gary Phillips gave me a chance. But when I came in, then I went back straight away again, then worked, then come back again. So there's an environment that you need to create for these youngsters to come through, and then support them, and then be patient with them too.
Labby, just quickly, how hard is it as well with the B League competition at the end of the season? Have you had much, like, your players are going to play obviously 30 rounds. In the Premier League, you also have a playoff series, and then you'll be going straight into that B League competition. So how is it hard? Has it been hard planning for that? And obviously, where Achilles is saying there probably will be more opportunities because there's going to be more squad members needed for all these competitions. Plus, like you play in a cup competition, the FFA Cup as well.
Well, part of the reason where we started doing the full morning session is to lead us into that new phase, new era that everybody's excited about. Obviously, there's going to be certain rules that certain age players you need to sign for that league too, because there is rules there for that. We're already starting to look at that, and that's what you'll see a lot of youngsters at the moment. We've got a lot of ex-players from, let's say, an A-League academies that have come in, that we looked at them, and they fit that profile between age 20 to 22, 23. And again, starting this early, the process of training and the mornings and the gym and the recoveries, all that, we believe that will put us in a good place come that time.
Andy, anything?
I just wanted to ask, Labby, obviously a big win on the weekend, but what's the expectation now for the remainder of the season? Are you guys? You did mention there's quite a young squad, but are you expecting to go deep in the league and possibly make the finals, top six?
Yeah. Well, again, we're talking about the size of the club, so I'm not going to run away from that and say.
I think the club, Andy's going to want to be in the top six.
It's again, like I said, I think people forget that I was brought up in this club, so But again, you've got to understand it's good. You got to take one game at a time. We win one game, and everybody thinks that things are good, or we lose one game, and everybody then, it's part of football. It's you need to move on, and games come very, very fast. Obviously, Wednesday, Saturday, now game again, then we've got to catch up game. So, but the most important thing is I think a coach once told me that you learn a lot from losses. And then, winning is good, and you get a lot out of it, obviously, the confidence and that. But I think you also have to be humbled and understand that sometimes on a day when you're not good enough, you will not win. And in NPL space, which I've got a lot of time for it, a lot of respect for the players, for the coaches. Every game is a battle. It's everybody wants to beat you. Everybody turns up, and it's a real passion that I really enjoy. For people that know me, that's how I am. And then I love the competition, and I respect the competition, and yeah.
Labby, it is a tough competition, week in, week out. You do have to turn up. Looking at the table and the teams in the top six at the moment, who do you think is the dark horse to take, to finish in the top two? Like Spirit's doing really well, Marconi's there again. You're looking at Rockdale, Manly, Blacktown, Apia, and even St. George Saints. They're a bit of a dark horse. They're on a bit of a run at the moment. And then obviously followed by you guys in 8th position. So, if you win your catch-up game, it brings you, catapults you to top 5. And then obviously you want to get on a bit of a run and get momentum. And, you know better than yourself. Once winning becomes a habit, the dressing room, becomes more lively. The fans start coming back. Everyone's excited. Everyone starts talking about, Olympic in the top 6 and so forth and so forth and so forth.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't say there's a dark horse there, because I think the teams that we played so far, the teams that I'm watching through the weekends, I think all of them give you different challenges. And you mentioned some of the names there. I actually think it's a very open competition, and a competition that it's exciting for us coaches, for players, and also for fans. I think you do need to get a run, yes, and you're right, 100% winning is a habit, but I don't want to disrespect any of the teams because I really do like all of them, what they offer in different ways, of course, different challenges. There's a lot of tactically now. There's a lot of things are starting to happen, which maybe prior didn't happen as much. You see teams with back three, with back five. There's a lot of rotations, and there's that element that's coming a lot into the game now, and I quite enjoy it. And again, sometimes I just watch the game from far as a fan, and because I do think it's a very, I don't think it gets much respect that the league, it should get more. So I don't want to just say, oh, there's a dark horse here or there, because I think they all present different challenges. And again, you have to turn up on the day. That's as simple as it gets, because I remember last year we went on a run, and then we Central Coast, I think, came home and beat us 2-1, for example. But then we went and beat Rogdale 2-1 at home, and Rogdale ended up winning the league. So my point is that there is no easy games, and each of them bring you tactically different challenges now.
Labby.
So for all the fans out there, which player in your squad should we look out for in the coming weeks? That's going to hit the ground running. No pressure at all, Labby. No pressure.
I think I was impressed with the young striker that scored the goal as well, the fourth one.
Look, again, for people that know me, I don't like to isolate a player. It's a team game. It is an exciting team. And again, I think maybe I'll start losing my hair soon, or maybe going grey, whatever, at times, at days. But there's a lot of excitement there. But again, it's not fair just to pinpoint one player. We got Dylan was good on a weekend, Seth was good on a weekend, Jack Armisen obviously has been around the league. So it's I was an attacker, so it's a bit maybe biased. So I'll go on the attacking side. But look, they all deserve to be there, and they're trying, they wanting to learn more, they want to challenge. So I get them all as a team.
Labby, thank you for your time tonight. You've always gave your time for me over the years. Appreciate it. Good, and we're all ex-Sydney Olympic, except Andy. Andy's a Club Marconi. We're all Sydney Olympic fans and tragics, and we want the club striving and doing well. And hopefully, the future's bright, and hopefully that's what we want. And good luck for the rest of the season.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always time for each other. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Labby. Thanks, and thank you, boys.
Well, Labby, good luck.
Well, Andy, we know that Sydney Olympic is a powerhouse club, and it's always been it's a pressure cooker club. It's thrived on results. Achilles has got a point of late as well. We see other clubs. The Greek factor is a big thing as well. Fans want to see Greek players playing. I know it's not all about the Greek players, but it's a big job.
All these historical ethnic clubs that made the league what it is back in the NSL days, you go through all from youth level up to senior level. They want to see in their own kind, whether it's Sydney Olympic, whether it's Sydney United, Marconi. But sometimes those days it's difficult. It's difficult to find that balance there, because you've got things like sponsorship involved, or you've got other parties that influence all that. But the thing is with Sydney Olympic, for me, it's one of those clubs, that the league is doing well, and I think Labby touched on it, but I think the NPL is really, really underrated. We spoke about it last week, Charles. Even both here and in Victoria, the NPL leagues in both these states, they're the ones that I sort of really mainly follow. But
like I said, you've got every game on YouTube as well, and like you said, there's exciting games, exciting players. Jurasevsky, Kubo at Hills. There's a lot of exciting players that play in the NPL. Carla Oliveri at Sydney United, Marconi. They've got Costanzo there. There's great talent in the NPL, and there's some great quality players. You go out there and watch it. I mean, so it's a top competition. It's closed the gap on the A-League. There is still a bit of a gap, but it's a good, healthy competition, and it's great where you see players coming from the NPL system moving into the A-League and doing really well as well.
The thing back on Sydney Olympic is when they're doing well, it's one of those, when you say, oh, when such and such team is doing well, the whole league is doing well. I think Olympic is one of those clubs in the NPL.
100%.
When Sydney Olympic is flying, the fans jump on board, as you guys know, being a part of it. When Sydney Olympic is doing well, the whole league, I think, at NPL level is doing well. So.
Just quickly, because we are times really catching up on us, we'll just look at the New South Wales Premier League 1. We had Blacktown Spartans 0, Uni 5, Northern Tigers 1. In the big game, SD Raiders 2. Macarthur Rams drew with my club, Darwich Hill 0-0. Canterbury had a good win over Bankstown City 2-0. Hills United went down to Rydalmere 3-0. Interlions and Hakoah shared the spoils 2-2. And Newcastle Jets and Mounties also had a 2-2 draw. And yesterday, Bulls Academy 3, Bonnyrigg 1. So in those top 2 positions, SD Raiders still flying, team to beat, and the team that's looking to be promoted to the NPL on 22 points. Northern Tigers second on 19, followed by the Jets on 17, Bulls FC 15, Uni 14, Blacktown Spartans round up the top 6 on 14 points, but SD Raiders and Northern Tigers, but SD Raiders are looking really good at the moment, haven't lost a game and really looking good for promotion. But that's our NPL segment covered there quickly, and probably we have come to the end of the show. We haven't really been able to get into the football fever. It's been a big show. We'll get into the EPL a bit later. I'll have a show during the week myself on the EPL. But Achilles, thank you for tonight. Last minute you were brought in. You've been a hit on our chat box here. There's been quite a few chat messages about yourself and Andy there, so we haven't had time even to have a look at those messages. It's been such a huge show, but once again, boys, thank you for the show tonight. And like I said, we're trying our best, and every week we'll try and improve. It's only been 2 weeks back, getting used to the new technology as well, and we'll be back next week, bigger and better. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on YouTube. Any story breaks, any scoops breaks, Football Fever is always on top of it, and we're always ready to break a story.
Albert, thank you very much for having me. You can always call me anytime, lastminute.com. I'm here for you. You're doing a fantastic job, bringing, the football knowledge to everyone, whether it's A-League, W League, NPL 1, 2, and so forth. You cover nearly every aspect of football. It's a great show. I wish you all the success. Andy, nice meeting you.
Yeah, likewise.
You had some... Okay, and keep it up. Keep up the good work. And anytime you need me, Chubb, I'll be for you, mate. 100%.
Andy, legend. Newcastle flying. That's all we can say. Newcastle still flying, Andy.
Big game tomorrow morning, mate.
Massive game. All right, boys, that's it for Football Fever tonight. Appreciate it. We'll be back bigger and better. And like I said, keep your eye on Chubba TV, and we'll have everything on there. We'll do a highlights package for anyone that missed the interviews. There'll be a highlight package and videos of the show today as well. Appreciate it. Thank you and good night.
All right.